Hey there, and hello. Um, basically, today I want to talk a little bit about the Docker and Redis implementation that I have put in. And I've just been, I've been thinking more and more about the initial architecture and using Kafka to update the Redis cache. And like, the more I think about it, the more I think probably the more straightforward solution is also the one that I've implemented now, which is just going to be updating the cache directly after we, insert a value into our database. Um, but I do want to use Kafka, so I'm going to do it that way anyway, um, even if it may not be the best because, well, I want to, because this is also for practicing. But yeah, so what I've been working on is I've implemented Docker as well as Docker Compose. So for that, that way I can spin up like a Redis instance and kind of connect to that alongside our web server so that I don't have to like open a bunch of different terminals and have like a bunch of different things running, but rather we can use Docker Compose for it. And yeah, then extra things that I've been working on is again more refactoring of trying to like reduce the length of functions and stuff like that, and splitting them off into different purposes, but also like implementing the cache method, which has been here. Oh, cool. Update common vote cache. So yeah, so we have it here. Basically, we either update it in Redis if the value exists, or we will insert it into Redis if it does not exist. And the updating, so this is something that I've been thinking about yesterday, which is like the potential of using locks. Because really, if we can enter race conditions if there's a post that's being updated a lot, and even though our database won't go out of sync, our cache will if we have race conditions. Because for our database, sorry about that. For our database, we just have inserts, but for our Redis, we would basically have like a read and then increment, which can cause race conditions. But it was really nice that there's actually a hash increment by, and because Redis is a single threaded application, I feel pretty confident that this command, unlike the get and then set, would actually mean that we don't run into race conditions, because we're kind of issuing a single command to Redis, which it will process, one after the other. So this has been quite a nice find. And oh yeah, what else? Yeah, I also refactored some of our where is it? I think it was in the submit helpers. No. Oh yeah, here. When updating, so I implemented the getting of the cache too from when we're formatting the data. So we always use this upvote count, and now we can basically use the same method that we were using in our Redis, or not this one, but in here we can use the same method that we were using for setting the Redis cache. So if we don't have a Redis value, then we can use this one, which we've also defined in here, which inserts the value and then returns our, the value that has been inserted, so that we can continue to use that. And then aside from that, yeah, we can just get it directly from the database, which has also been, the method has also been moved to here, so that we can use it directly here, because otherwise I also ran into this weird problem of like circular imports between these two files, because they would be importing from each other, which means I'd have to put the import statement of one of them below where some of the functions have been defined, but then really like I'm only using these functions in like certain places, and so I just decided to migrate all of those into the respective files to avoid having like weird import structures. But yeah, this is kind of like how the cache has been implemented now, and basically, we're kind of getting it, and if it's not set, we will set it for every single comment that we retrieve. And we're also using hashes, hset and hget for this, so that way we can keep all of the information for the same post in the same hash, and the different comments have different votes, which will be different keys. And so if we ever need to get all the votes for everything in a post, we can do we can just get the whole hash here, and otherwise we can get it on a key by key basis. Yeah. Oh, it's not. Okay. Yeah. So this is kind of like the current state of things, and it's been really nice to use Docker for this. Yeah, just because it it helps deal with that reproducibility component to make sure that even though we're using a virtual environment, there could still be things set up on your local machine that allow for something to execute or not execute smoothly. And so just, having all of this running in Docker is just, making it a lot easier, but also, makes me feel a lot safer that when we want to deploy this, it will be much easier, and that, we don't need to change other things that have been broken, because there are certain dependencies on my machine that I didn't think about that, now the application no longer works. So yeah, just waiting for this to spin up. Okay, and then yeah, we can actually just follow this link directly, and let me move you over. Not much I don't think anything has changed on the front end actually. I think everything that I've been doing has been on the back. I'm just trying to find the tab for it. I wonder if it's this one. Yes. Yeah. So you can see nothing has been changed. The only thing that has been changed is that we're using values from the cache here now. So yeah, I think that's pretty nice. Sometimes the worker gets stuck. I have to look into why. Maybe we can spin up extra worker processes for our Unicorn server, or maybe it's because I have a bunch of things running on my machine. But you can see here, sometimes this request gets stuck somewhere. I'll have to figure out also where it's getting stuck, because I don't think this happened before I was in Docker, so maybe it has to do with the communication to the outside of the container into my machine somewhere, although I'm not super sure about that. So yeah, I'll have to see. I think the other things that are also going to be interesting to implement is I want to do a cache warm-up as soon as someone sees a post, rather than when you're going in, because when you go in, you ideally already have all of the all of the data cached for all the comments, so that you're not loading the comments one by one and then you're trying to retrieve them from cache, but rather once, and we don't have this yet, but once this site page is implemented here, where we can actually see some of the posts, we can already start warming up the cache for each of them if they're not warmed up, just to make sure that, that if someone were to click into it, that all of that information is already there, so that, we don't have to do it on the spot. There are, of course, some drawbacks to that too, which is, people can scroll through a bunch of things, but not actually be reading any comments. But I don't think that's too big of an issue, because either if that happens, a post will have no comments, which means there's nothing to warm up really, or a post will have a bunch of comments, which means it will already be, either it will have 0 or more than 0. So if there's 0, it'll be nothing to warm up, and if it has more than 0, then if that number is small, it's not a big deal to warm it up, and if that number is large, it's likely already warmed up. So I don't think this will really be a problem. And I think it can probably make that experience a little bit smoother. Of course, I want to make sure that that process gets separated um, from like the actual like loading of the posts. So I don't want when we go like to the site page, for example, I don't want all of this to buffer until every single cache for every single post has been warmed up. And maybe this is where we come back to Kafka or just a general message queue, where we can, pass off posts and be like, this post needs to get its cache warmed up, and we will put that into a queue, and then a worker can take care of that for us in the background, kind of, decoupled from the actual application that's kind of responsible for loading this data here. So maybe that would work, and would actually be good use. But yeah, anyway, other things that I've done is I've actually gone back to the schema here, and I've changed it a little bit. The key format here used to be post ID and parent comment ID, but right now I've just changed it to the name being the post ID. Oh, well, this is actually still wrong. The name is just the post ID. The key is the comment ID, and then the value is the apps, like the upvote count that we want to show on the front end. I know I keep saying this as like absolute value, but it's not the absolute value, but it's like the difference between the upvotes and the downvotes. So that's kind of how our hash structure is right now. And I know initially my plan was going to be to kind of like implement this on like layer by layers. But right now I've actually done it on a post by post basis. I'm thinking about, so there are two ways that I think I can, I don't know if I'll implement all of this, but there are two ways that I'm thinking about that this process can be improved. So one of them is trying to do this on like a layer by layer, which will also affect how you're displaying data on the front end. But I was actually checking Reddit again, and the way that Reddit does it is very interesting, is that they have, like some of the nested comments are there, but then they have like a cutoff at some point. And so, so that's kind of like an interesting case where, like in that way you don't want to retrieve things layer by layer, but you actually only want to retrieve like